get started now. Okay, so Matinee is a tool which allows you to build the in-game cinematics and cutscenes in your game. So as I was saying earlier this morning in the UDK overview, a lot of the tools that you need to develop games is all pre-built inside Unreal Editor. You don't really need to jump to a different executable or a different program to do these sorts of things. And it basically allows you to do really quick iterations of all your cutscenes in your game. Matinee can also be used just to control moving things. So a really good example of that is if you walk up to a door, you want the door to spin some cogs or something and then open up and stuff like that, or release like some steam or change some materials. You can do that within Matinee as well. Another good example would be doing lifts in your game. You could do that using Matinee as well. So a lift could go down and then the doors open up. And you do that using Matinee rather than doing that through script. And the reason why you want to do that through Matinee is because your content creators are going to be the best people who are going to understand exactly this is how I want things to look and to operate. Traditionally, way back in the 90s, we would actually just code the whole thing out. So, and cinematics can take ownership of the camera if you want. So like for example, when I said the example about the doors and the lifts and things, you don't really want to take control of the camera. You want to still let the player still run around and do things. And this is really important. So if you actually want to have a cutscene where players have to look at something, then you can take control of that if you want. And Matinee is controlled by kismet. You can play kismet through Unreal Script and stop kismet through Unreal Script if you really wanted to. But it just makes it easier if it's in kismet because then your content designers can control when to play, when to stop, when to pause it, and so forth. Okay, so we're going to jump to start creating this a little movie. And really what we're going to do this session is to have a look at some of the things that you can do in Matinee. There's simply not enough time to go through all your available options inside Matinee. So we're just going to have a look at a few things. So we're going to look at things like how do you move things around using Matinee, how do you cut to different cameras if you're doing a cutscene, how you fade in and out. So as you cut from camera A to camera B, you have sort of like a little fade in between those cuts, so it's not just an instantaneous cut. We're going to look at how you animate some characters, and we're going to have to, and lastly we're going to look at some sound and some music and stuff like that. So the first thing to do inside Unreal Editor is to open up the first Matinee example map. So if you go to Unreal Ed and you just go to the open screen, and it would probably go straight, it'd probably start here in your maps directory. So you just want to go one directory down into your content, and then into Unreal University, Introduction to Unreal Ed, and you'll find Introduction to Matinee, and then Introduction to Matinee _A. So if you open this map up, this is a map that I created, has all the cameras and the lights in it already, just because it's not really part of what we're trying to teach today, and has all the, so we can start working on the cutscene part straight away. So the first thing to do is to create a new Matinee, and how we do that is by opening up the kismet window, which is by clicking on this little K button here. And so that's the kismet window there. Just hands up if you haven't quite got to this step yet. Nope, everyone's all good. Now to create new nodes in kismet, it's just it's a right click within the workspace here, and there will be an option here which says new Matinee. And this kismet node is your Matinee node. So as you can see there, it has some inputs in there to start a Matinee, to play it, to reverse it, so you can play it in the opposite direction. So this is how you would handle, so to play some doors, you can play it so the doors open, and then if you reverse the Matinee, it'll close the doors, it'll simulate that. You could also stop and pause at any time, and you can also change the direction. but we won't look too much into that today. It also has outputs to tell you when things have finished, or when, if it's reversing, when the reversing has finished. So in this particular session today, we're going to just play a cutscene as soon as the level is loaded into the map. And how you do this is by adding a level loaded kismet event, and then you connect that to your Matinee node. So how you do that is you right click in the kismet workspace, and you go to new event, and you click on the level loaded event. And so this event will be triggered by the engine once the level has been loaded into the game and starts up. It can then do something. So we can then connect the level loaded invisible output into the Matinee play by left clicking on the box there and then just dragging it to there. So this is a really basic setup. If you were, say, when your game first starts, you can jump to a level which plays like an introduction of the game. Maybe your character starts out by being knocked down on the ground, and he slowly wakes up or something like that. And there's combat sort of animating all around him and stuff like that. So this is a really basic setup of how you would set that up. All right, everybody's there. Hands up if you're stuck somewhere. Cool, everyone's all good. So the next thing we want to do is make one of the lifts move. If you haven't quite got there, you can always open up the number B file, _B, and this will jump you ahead to where we are now. So basically in this map that we have here, we have these two sort of, I guess, elevator shafts. And these are the lifts that I'm talking about down here. And we have that on two sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these lifts come up when the Matinee starts playing. I think what I'll do is... oh, okay. In that case... right. Okay, so a way we can do that is in your kismet window, you can open up Matinee in two different ways. One way is to go to the kismet window and double click on the Matinee box. And this is the Matinee editor. The other way that you can also do it is you can click on this button here, which sort of looks like a, I forget what that thing is called, but they use it in movies, a cupboard or something like that, so that's what it looks like. But you can open up Matinee by using this as well. It's just a quick way of doing it. So this is the Matinee editor. And basically what you have at the top section here is the curve editor. And the curve editor is going to be used for controlling and adjusting some parameters for some of the nodes later on. And we'll get into that curve editor later. Just for now, just remember this as the top part here is the curve editor. The bottom part here controls all the lights, all the moving meshes, all the animations and stuff like that. And it contains all the keyframe data. So how many of you guys come from a content creation background such as 3ds Max or Maya? Got two guys down there, a couple of guys up here, and one guy over there. So this is basically the keyframe data section. Like a Max, down at the bottom, that's where you make all your animations, right? And you can add keyframes. This is pretty much this whole section here is the same thing. So select one of the lift meshes that you see by moving the camera around. So I'm just going to select one of these. You can select the same one as me. And once you've done that, oh, sorry. You right-click within this gray empty space here, and you can add a new empty group. You can call that group whatever you like. Create new empty group. So you get a little dialog box like this, and I'm just going to call it human lift. And here you get a new group. So this new group, basically you can add some control tracks to it, and these control tracks will allow you to move the mesh, rotate the mesh, and do a few other things as well. So it's hard to notice right at the beginning, but there's actually a little thin bar just down here, and that shows you the current where the current movie is at any given point in time. So as you can see, I'm moving, as I'm sliding, you can see the second position moving as I slide this. And you can use the mouse wheel to scroll in and out of the whole control track. So I'm sort of, past the halfway point of the movie. And this is important because it allows you to insert keyframes at different points in time. So one of the things that we're going to do now is insert a movement key. But before we can insert the movement key, we have to create the movement track. And the way we do that is by right-clicking on the human lift group and select Add New Movement Track. As you can see, we have a whole bunch of tracks here. They allow you to change different things. So you could create a Add New Float Material Parameter track. That allows you to adjust some of the material parameters. So that way you can have say, a door that opens, and then you can have lights switching on down the hallway or something like that, and you could set it up through that. But today we're going to have a look at the Add New Movement Track. So then we get this. And as you can see, when you added that track, you get a zero-framed key right here. So what we're going to do now is just move the timeline along, and we're just going to add a new keyframe by pressing Enter. And so you should get a new keyframe there. And then from there, it becomes what you see is what you're going to get type editor when it comes to moving things around. So it's the same as 3ds Max or whatever else like that. So with that keyframe selected, when it's selected, it will have an orange border around it. So I can select this keyframe here. But I'm not, I want to edit this one here. And using the translation widget here, I can move that upwards to there. So once you've moved the lift, you'll see this yellow line down here. And what that yellow line represents is the interpolation movement track. So everybody was able to keep up with me? Cool. So one of the neat things you can do, if you want to reset your timeline straight away, you can just press the stop button, and it'll reset back to timeline 0. And then you can press the play button to actually see the lift moving. So as you can see, it's a really simple system to get things moving straight away. So with this basic knowledge, you can create lifts because as the lift moves up, as long as it has collision information, the collision information will push things upwards. So if a player was standing on top of that, it would push the player upwards. Okay, so we're going to start adding some camera cuts. So if you want to jump forward and open up the map with the _C, basically it'll have all the lift information done. It'll have all the lift stuff done for you. So we'll jump to that version of the map now. I'm not going to save what we've done. I'm not going to save my information to _B. So if we just preview what's going on with the matinee, you see I've done all the lift data for you. So we're going to add some camera cuts. So as the movie starts, it'll be camera A, and then as the movie progresses, it'll cut to number B, number C, number D, and so on. And so one of the things I pre-set up for you guys in this particular version of the map is all the cameras. I put them into the level already. If you're not entirely sure how I got the cameras into the level, come to one of my sessions tomorrow, and we'll be going over the Unreal Editor stuff tomorrow. You know, how to place down BSPs, static meshes, and so on. And that'll give you more information of how to actually place all these static meshes down and so forth. So what we're going to do first is we're going to find some cameras. So in one of the lifts here, we've actually got some cameras there already. They look like this. So they look like those old-timey reel cameras. And there'll be, and in the other lift, there are also cameras there as well. If you don't want to hunt around for cameras like this, one easy way you can look for things is by using the Find tool. So this is the Find tool. It uses binoculars for its icon. And it comes up with a window like this, and you can search for cameras. And that'll show you all the cameras that are inside the map. And that way, if you want to instantly teleport to where one of the cameras are, you can just double click it, and it'll instantly teleport you to where that camera is. So that's another really easy way to find where the cameras are at any given time. Okay, so we're going to be making a few cuts to, we're going to be making the camera cuts. So what we need to do there is select one of the cameras. You then right click in this empty space again, and you can add a new camera group. And again, it'll come up with an option to give it a name. So I'm just going to call it camera A. And we're going to do this for a few cameras, because otherwise if we only add one camera, we have no other cameras to switch to. So I'm going to add camera B, and I'll do it once more for a third camera cut. If you get lots and lots of controls here, or groups here, you can compress them by using these arrows here. And the scroll bar is actually on the left-hand side and not the right-hand side. So I'm going to add a camera C. Like so. And you'll see it automatically adds a movement control track, and it also adds a FOV control track. We can get into those a little bit later if we have a little bit more time. This allows you to move the cameras around, and as you cut to the different cameras, you can sort of move around and then cut to another moving camera and then cut to another moving camera. So it depends on how what kind of a cinematic feel you want to go for. So you can have sort of a camera which, say you have like a Lord of the Rings sort of a setup where you have trees and you have mountains and so on. You can have one camera sweeping down, and then you can have another camera following the guys on the horses, and you can cut between them, for example, and sort of have that nice cinematic feel. We're going to repeat this for all the cameras in the scene, so as we only need to cut to a few cameras. Okay, so how do we actually do the camera cuts now that we've added all these cameras, movements and so forth? Normally this dir group isn't here. I actually kind of forgot to delete this before I made this map. So if you want to start with that by just right-clicking and deleting, just right-click and delete the group. So normally this is how you would normally see it. So to recreate the director group, you actually right-click here and you can click Add New Director Group. So that's actually how you make the director group. So you'll get this set up here as well. So in the director control track, which is this one here, this is where you set up all the camera cuts in your cutscene. And the way you do that is by right-clicking on the dir group. Oh, sorry, it actually automatically creates the director. So using the same adding addition of the keys is how you set up between the different camera cuts. So make sure your director track is selected, and then if you press enter at keyframe 0, it'll ask you which group you want to cut to. And as you can see here, we've got several groups. Human lift, cyborg lift, these don't represent cameras, and we've got a dir group, which is this one here, but that doesn't represent a camera. But we have camera A, B, and C, which is the ones that we made just before. So if you select that one, then push OK, you'll get this. And basically what that's saying is that from this moment on, you'll be viewing through this camera group. And if you want to switch to another camera group, you drag the timeline across because you need to in order to insert a different keyframe. You can then press enter to insert a new keyframe, and that will ask you again which camera you want to cut to. So I'm going to here select camera B. So basically what the Matinee tool is doing is saying that from here on in, at 5.71 seconds, I'm going to switch to camera B. And I'm going to do that once more for camera C. Cool, so everybody was able to keep up with that? Hands up if anyone's a bit stuck. You good? Great. Okay, so let's preview this. So one of the things you have to do is actually click on this little camera icon here. And when you click on those, so you'll notice that there's several camera icons here. What this does is that this particular group takes control over the camera. You can have them all off, and that means that the Matinee won't take over the camera, or you can have one of them on, and it means that the camera will be taken over by this particular group. So we're going to click that, and it goes yellow. We're going to reset the Matinee back to timeline 0. And if we press play, it's going to go through the cameras, and it'll cut between different scenes. So it's cutting between the different cameras now. So did that work for everybody here? And so as you're setting up your Matinee scene, you just continue to add these cuts and so on. At any given time, you can actually also select the keyframes by clicking on the triangles, and you can use the left and right arrows to actually move them around, or you can delete them if you don't want them anymore. So pressing the delete key will delete them, and that way you're getting, now I've only got 2 camera cuts. Cool, okay, so we're going to move on. We'll move on to adding camera fading. So as you cut between different cameras, it might be nice to add a little fade in and fade out time period so that it's not an instantaneous cut. So this would be somewhat similar to how movies would normally do this. If they go from one scene to another, they have a really brief fade to black, and then it fades out to clear again. And you can do this within the Matinee. So we're going to jump forward to the introduction to Matinee_D map file. And when you open that map, basically I've done all the cuts between the different cameras and so on. So we'll be able to see exactly the same thing. So introduction to Matinee_D. All right. So if we check out the Matinee and that, you see I've got all the camera cuts, and I actually have quite a lot of cameras in here. So if we play the movie, you get this nice sweeping movement of the camera using the movement track node that we learned earlier of how we move the lifts. And then we've got the different camera cuts as well. Okay, so that's where we're at the moment. Okay, so how do we add the fading? So we need to add a fade track, and you add that to the dir groups. So right click on dir group, add fade track, which is just located down here. So fade tracks will only go between black and clear. So they don't colorize. It's just a really simple tool to allow you to do some nice transitions. So click on that and you'll see a nice fade thing here, fade control. And then we insert keys in the same way. So we move the timeline across and we insert keys where we want them. So in this case, I want to set up the keys so that they're exactly where the cuts are. So I'm just going to add the first couple ones. So one way to do this is to select the key, but when you select the key, it automatically selects the director group. So you want to switch to the fade control track, and then you press enter, and that'll give me some keys. So I'm going to set up the first 3 camera cuts. So basically what data you're providing to Matinee is that you're going to do a camera cut here, and you want to do a fading here, camera cut here, a fading here, a camera cut here, and a fading there. The fading is controlled by the curve editor, and this is where we're going to start looking at the curve editor. Now, the curve editor is going up and down like this, for example, if you decide to set the data up that way. So you want to go from 0 to 1, meaning 0 is fully clear, and then 1 is fully black. But this is not enough key points or keyframes, because if you can only provide a 0 or 1, then this is going to go 0, and then this is going to 1. So it'll go 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.5, 0.7, then 0.9, and then 1. We don't really want it to go from clear to black. We don't really want to do that. We want to produce a curve which does this. So one handy thing you can do is you can select the keyframe there to set the timeline there, and then you can press the left arrow to go slightly back from that keyframe. And if you want smaller indents, this changes the granularity of those keys. So if you bring that down, you can set it to like 0.1 of a second. And that way, as you use the left and right keys, you get smaller adjustments. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to select that key there. I'm going to deselect it, because otherwise if I select that key and then use the left and right keys, it's going to move that key around. So I'm then going to push the right key to offset a little bit, and then insert another key there. And I'm going to do this for the other two as well. So I'm going to insert a key slightly back, and then insert a key slightly front as well. So to change the granularity is use this drop-down box, and you can. These are all in seconds. Well, actually, sorry. The first couple of options is in seconds, and these couple of options is in the frame rates per second. So if you want to have more precise control, saying like after 10 frames or whatever else, you can use that. But seconds is usually pretty easy. So I'm going to go slightly back. So as you can see here, as we're using really small granularity, you can actually use the scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom up within that timeline. So as we zoom up the timeline, we can see the triangles a little bit more clearly. Okay, so we're now going to look at the curve editor for fading. So we want to need to add this control track to the curve editor. And the way we do this is that there is a little box here, and if you click on that box, it becomes yellow. And it actually adds all of those keyframes and points to the curve up here. So with all of these points, they're all currently set to 0. So if we play this movie now, it'll just be all black. So what we want to do is you want to set the second point that I've added here. You want to set that to, you can do that by right-clicking on the key point and set value, and we set it to 1 so that we're fading the movie in. And then this is towards the second cut, as you can see. We're moving towards the second camera, and we want to fade that back to black. So that will be 1, and as you can see, the curve is now going down to 0, and you want to set that I do have to apologize. Looks like I had the numbers the wrong way around. 0 is clear, and 1 is actually fully black. I think I must have got that around the wrong way. So what we actually want to do is set the first one to 1, and then the rest to 0. So as we get to the camera cuts, we want to fade to black. So if we were to play this movie now, or if we were to scrub through the timeline, you can actually see the fades yourself. So you can see it fading. I'll just move that a little bit there. So you can see it actually fading in. And as we cut between the different cameras, it fades to black and then it fades out again. And as we cut to another camera, it fades out and cuts to a different camera. And this gives you this gives you slightly nicer transitions for your cutscenes. So to get the little points is you need to first add it to the curve editor, and you add it to the curve editor by pushing the little black box on the fade track, and then that way all of these little on the curve editor they'll appear. Cool. Was everybody else able to follow along with that? Great. And the curve editor is used for lots of things, not just the fade control track, but it can be used for things like soundtrack. If you want to be able to fade in between different music, if you want to play different sounds at similar times, or if you want to change some parameters with some of the other control tracks, such as the float parameter, for example. So we're going to move on to animating the characters now. Because right now the characters are just standing there not doing anything. So we're going to jump over to the introduction to Unreal Matinee _E. And basically what I've set up there and there is all the fading stuff. So you won't need to worry about the fading stuff. So we'll jump to that now. So for those of you who haven't quite got there with the fade track, I think the best thing to do is jump forwards to _E, and you can come and see Markus or I after the session, and we can clarify some of the finer points with you. So the first thing we want to do is select one of the guys on the lifts. So I'm actually going to select the human one, as I think the camera cuts to them first. So select the guy there, then open up Matinee. And again, you just use the right click, add new skeletal mesh group. And this will come up with a new group name, so you can decide to name it whatever you like. So one of the things about the animation stuff is that when you set up the anim tree for your characters, you can actually create new animation node slots. And basically this allows you to play multiple animations and they can blend in and out of each other. We're not going to set that up for you today because I've set it up for you guys. But check out the UDN documentation about how to set up anim trees if you're interested in that. Or you can look at the example later on. So the first thing we need to do is actually delete this existing animation track because it hasn't been set up with those slots in mind. So delete the track and then just right click on the group that you've created and you go add new anim control track. And that'll come up with a anim slot asking you which slot you want to use. You've only got one option here, so just click OK on that. So at this stage, all of the characters that are on the lift at this moment don't actually have any animation sets tied to them. And so if they don't have any animation sets tied to them, it actually has no clue what kind of animations you want to play. So in order to set an animation group, you need to open up your content browser by clicking on this button here, or you can use the shortcut key, which is Control-Shift-F. And from here, what you can do is you set the filter to just animation sets. You may need to go to the All Types for object types and just check animation set. And this will, in the content browser now, that'll just show you all of the existing animation sets. And you want to find one called K-anim human base male. It should be on the second row. So now that you've selected the animation set within the content browser, you can use this in various places. So if we go back to the Matinee, so down here you've got the properties for your animation slot control track. So you want to select the human group control. You want to select the human group, and it'll ask you what kind of, in here is the animation sets that are used by this control track. So you want to add this animation set that you've added here. So you want to add that. So click on the plus symbol to add a new entry, and then click on the little green arrow, and that'll set this field to the thing to the animation set that you've selected in the content browser. So the reason why this is an array is so that you can have lots of different animations from different animation sets. And this allows for sort of a modularity approach so that if you have 3 or 4 animators, they can work on different animation sets at any point in time. And that's important for things like source control. Okay, so from there, we can now start adding different animation tracks. So the way we do this is by using the timeline method again. So right now we have all the camera cuts, as you can see. So I'm just going to disable that while we modify this for now. So we're just going to turn this thing off. So that way you can move the camera around freely without Matinee taking over the camera. Right. So I'm just going to move the camera there so I can see what is happening. And select the animation control track and then make a new key point somewhere. So in this case, I'm going to add it at 0. So I press enter And then it'll ask me what animation I want to play. Now, all of these animations in these drop-down box comes from the animation set. So this animation set's quite large, and so it has lots of options. If you just use the cc_human_male_idle, that'll just play back some generic idle animation. And you click OK. So when you add the new node, when you add the new keyframe, it actually tells you how long this animation is actually played for through there as well. So now that if we scrub through the timeline, you will actually see this character here animating. It's actually kind of hard to see it animating. So what we can do here is actually blend between the different, because you can have multiple animation slots, you may often want to blend between the different animations. So for example, if you have a character idling and then you want it to blend from idle into a weapon equip animation, you actually need to add two slots, two anim control slots, have one animation control slot playing back the idle one, and then have the other animation control slot at some time to play back the weapon equipping animation, for example. And I'm going to add this to the curve editor so you can sort of see how you blend between them. So to add to the curve editor, again, we press this little box here. So it adds it here. And currently, it's the value of that is 0. So currently, this animation has a blend weight of 0. So it's not going to do anything. So we need to set this to a value. So if you hold down Control left click on the curve line, you'll actually insert a new curve point. And then if you right click, you can set its time value, which we're going to set to 0. And then we're going to set its weight to 1. So what this means is that we give this animation control track full blending weight. So if, for example, we had another animation control track, we'd also add that to the curve editor. You get another line here. And then at that, say, for example, 5 seconds in, we want to play a different animation. So just like the fade track, we would say that 4.5 seconds before that new track gets blended in, we'd start shifting its weight down to 0. And then the other curve would have a time at 4.5 seconds to start shifting its weight up to 1. And that way you get a really nice blend. But of course, as artists, you can decide what you want to do. You can say have the animation playing at 0.75 and the other animation playing at 0.25. And that way, when you get the two added together, you get a total blend weight of 1. But it's sort of blending between two different animations. So that way you can have one, for example, you can have one animation which plays a running animation, and then you can have another animation playing a crouched animation. And if you blend those two together inside Matinee, it looks like he's doing a crouched run of some sort. So if we play that now, you see the character animating there now. And so after this time frame, the character will stop animating. And then you can add another animation immediately afterwards as well. So the last thing we're going to do is look at how you add music and sound effects to your Matinee scene. So we're going to jump forward to the _F. And _F has all of the animation stuff done for you. So if you want to have a look at that, you can poke around in that file. But we're going to look now at how you add music. So the way we do that, we open up Matinee again. And the way you add music is in the dir group, or the director group. And you do that by right-clicking on the director group. And you can add new soundtrack. And so basically this track here will play back different sounds at the different key points, at the different keyframes that you set it at. So how do we actually add the sounds? We do this by going to the content browser, and we can use the filters again to only search for the sound cues that we want to play. So we'll say sound cues, and now the content browser is only going to show us all the sound cues that we want to play. We can further filter by searching the different folders here. So I'm going to search in the sounds and then inside the music. So we can play back different sounds, and you can sort of decide what kind of music you want to play back. So okay, so that one's pretty good. So we select it in the content browser, and you go back to your Matinee window, and if you press enter, it should add a new keyframe. Yeah, and since this is looping music, it will basically fill up the entire Matinee scene. So as you can see, it goes on forever. At different keyframes, you can actually add different music. You can blend between the different music by using the curve editor. But if you need sounds to overlap each other, then you would actually add another control track. You can add as many control tracks as you want. So if you're inside heavy combat and you have guns firing, you would have one sound track for all the guns firing, and then you might have another soundtrack which plays back all like the player voices to tell the player to get down and things like that. Yeah. So for example, I can select a shorter sound, and you'll be able to see how long it takes for it to play that. So that's a robot dying. So I can add a new soundtrack, and then I can select a keyframe somewhere, and if I press enter, it'll add that sound in. And as you can see, it's only that length. It's only that long because it's the sound cue itself is not set up for looping or anything like that. If you missed the first UDK overview this morning, we're going to have another one tomorrow. And in the UDK overview, I talked a lot about how the sound cue works and things like that. So if you didn't get to see it this morning, then you can drop by tomorrow and see that. So now if we play back the Matinee, it'll play back the music, and it'll play back that robot dying sound. Yeah, not the right timing, but still, it sort of goes through the basics of how you would set that up. So, and you can add these. You can add the sound control track to your curve editor. It comes up by default with 3 different curves. And one of the curves controls the volume, another curve controls the pitch of the sound being played back, and another curve controls something. I can't remember. But it allows you to do things. So if a car is driving and you're animating that via your Matinee, you can adjust the pitch of the sound being played back to emulate, the car revving and things like that. Or you can adjust the pitch of the music so that as it gets towards really high intense action scenes, the music can become a little faster by adjusting the pitch. And you can do that all dynamically. So one thing we wanted to elaborate on is that when you start using UDK, and even though I've given a presentation on Matinee today, there's still a lot of questions that you might have. We've got a 15-minute window after this that there's a break between this session and the next one, and I can still help you with anything after that. But if you get home tonight and you download UDK and you want to start making some stuff, the forums has a dedicated subforum, and that's dedicated to UDK. And there are lots of veterans on the forums that can help you. So if you have questions about how different parts of Matinee work, you can ask questions there. And the site's at http://forums.epicgames.com. Also, don't forget that there's also the Unreal Developers Network. The short name for that is the UDN. And that's dedicated documentation for Unreal Development Kit as well. It's been constantly updated, so we try our best to make sure to update that every month. And we try to have lots of reference materials and examples there as well, and tutorials and things like that. So most of everything I've learned of Matinee was usually just using the UDN. And that's the website over there. There are some samples of how to do Matinee and how to do doors and lifts in the example map that comes with UDK when you first download it. So you can poke through that and figure out how that all works. So with everything combined, we're going to have a look at the finished result. So I'm going to do that by starting up the game. Oh, that's nice. I shouldn't have the camera floating in space. So that's using all of the stuff that we learned today in this session, doing all those things. So thanks very much for coming down and learning a little bit about UDK.